He built an empire worth millions, but for 8 long years, he never once saw the family he left behind. When the millionaire finally knocks on his ex-wife's door, her shock is nothing compared to the moment their son steps forward, staring at the father he doesn't even recognize. What happens next changes everything. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter as the car rolled past the familiar green road sign welcoming him back to his hometown. It had been 8 years since he had last taken this road, 8 years since he had seen the people he once called family. The city skyline behind him had long been replaced by winding streets and scattered houses, each one painted with memories he wasn't sure he was ready to. He slowed down at an intersection where he used to ride his bike as a boy, the cracked pavement unchanged, the corner store still standing. The weight in his chest grew heavier with every block. He had built a life most people would envy, a sprawling business empire, penthouses in cities that never slept, and more wealth than he had once dared to imagine. But success had come at a price, one he rarely admitted aloud. That price was his family, Claire and Liam, who he had left behind when ambition and ego drowned out love and responsibility. He had told himself it was temporary, that he would come back when he had something to show for himself. But temporary had turned into years, and years had hardened into silence. Now, as the fall leaves danced across the road in shades of amber and gold, Ethan knew that nothing about this return was part of his plan. He hadn't announced his arrival, he hadn't prepared a speech, he hadn't even thought of what he would say to Claire, who had once looked at him like he was her world. Or to Liam, the boy he had abandoned before he even learned how to read. The silence in the car seemed to mock him, filled only by the low hum of the engine and He pulled into the main street, noticing how little had changed. The bakery still displayed its morning poutsies in the window. The old barber shop still had its striped pole spinning lazily, and the park where he and Claire had spent countless evenings still held its worn benches. But where the town had remained still, time had etched itself into Ethan's reflection. His hair, once unruly and dark, carried threads of gray. His jawline was sharper, his face more weathered. He looked like a man who had won battles, but also like one who had lost something far more valuable along the way. The closer he got to Claire's house, the slower he drove, as though time itself was resisting his steps. He passed the elementary school, its playground echoing with children's laughter. He thought of Liam, now almost 9 years old, and wondered if his son's laughter sounded anything like his had at that age. Did Liam like soccer, the way Ethan had? Did he prefer books, or perhaps music? These were questions a father should never have to ask a stranger, yet here he was, knowing less about his own son than most casual neighbors. His chest tightened when the modest blue house finally came into view. The paint was slightly faded, the garden smaller than he remembered, but it was undeniably Claire's home. It struck him with painful clarity that this was no longer their home. It was hers and Liam's, built without him, sustained without him, lived in without him. His sleek black car looked out of place against the worn driveway, like an uninvited guest announcing wealth that didn't belong here. He parked across the street, unable to bring himself to pull into the driveway. For a long moment, he simply sat there, staring. His mind replayed the day he left. He could still see Claire standing in the doorway, their son in her arms, both watching as he walked away, with promises he never kept. At the time, he told himself he was doing it for them, that his dreams would one day lift them all into a life they deserved. But dreams had turned into excuses, and excuses had turned into silence. His hand hovered over the door handle, but hesitation held him prisoner. What if Claire slammed the door in his face? What if Liam refused to acknowledge him? What if he had waited too long and there was no space left for him in their lives? He felt like an intruder on the life they had built, a man trespassing into the home of people he had once vowed to protect. Finally, he forced himself to breathe, deep and steady. He hadn't driven all this way to sit in the shadows. He owed them more than that. He stepped out of the car, the cool autumn air rushing against his face. Every sound seemed sharper, every detail more vivid. The crunch of leaves beneath his shoes, the faint barking of a dog in the distance, the faint smell of wood smoke drifting from a nearby chimney. All of it grounded him in the reality of this moment. Standing at the edge of the driveway, he froze again. Through the front window, he could see movement. A woman bent over a table, her auburn hair pulled into a loose bun. His heart thudded in recognition. Claire. Even after all these years, he knew her silhouette instantly. Time had changed her too. He could tell from the way she carried herself. More burdened, more careful. But she was still unmistakably her. He wanted to rush to the door, to say her name, to explain everything he had rehearsed in his mind over sleepless nights. But the words felt too heavy, too fragile to trust. He caught sight of another figure darting past the window, a small boy with messy brown hair. Ethan's breath hitched. Liam, his son. For the first time in years, he was seeing him not as a baby, frozen in memory, but as a child growing up without him. The boy's movements were lively, his gestures animated, his energy filling the room. Ethan's throat tightened as he realized he had missed it all. First steps, first words, birthdays, scraped, every milestone gone without him. His legs felt weak beneath him as he stayed rooted to the ground. He could walk away now, retreat into the life he had built, continue being the man who provided from afar, but never showed his face. That path was easier, but the harder path, the one that terrified him, was to knock on that door and face the truth. And so, he took the first step onto the driveway, his shoes crunching louder than they should have. Each step forward was a battle against his own fear, his own regret. By the time he reached the door, his hand trembled as he raised it to knock. He hesitated one last time, his reflection staring back at him in the small glass panel. He barely recognized the man looking back. Then he knocked, 3 firm raps echoing through the quiet street. The sound reverberated through the house, silencing the noise inside. Ethan's breath caught in his chest as he waited, every second stretching longer than the last. He heard faint footsteps, quick and light, followed by heavier ones. The door creaked open slightly, and there he was, Liam. The boy looked up at him, his brown eyes curious but cautious. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, but the words refused to come. The boy tilted his head slightly, then called out over his shoulder, "Mom, someone's at the door." Moments later, Claire appeared, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. When her gaze lifted to the man standing on her porch, the color drained from her face. She froze, the towel clutched in her hand as though it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. "Leah," Ethan finally managed, his voice low, hoarse, almost breaking under the weight of the moment. For a long silence, she simply stared at him. The years between them seemed to collapse into that space, years of absence, of unanswered questions, of pain left unspoken. She blinked, as though making sure she wasn't imagining him. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her tone carried more than just surprise. There was hurt there, deep and raw, layered beneath the shock. She stepped slightly forward, as if to shield Liam behind her. The boy, sensing the tension, glanced between them. "Mom? Who is he?" The question pierced Ethan deeper than any accusation could. His son didn't even recognize him. He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. I'm your dad," he said softly, his voice almost breaking. Liam's brow furrowed, confusion washing over his face. He looked to his mother for confirmation, searching her eyes for truth. Claire's lips tightened, her shoulders stiff. She placed a gentle hand on Liam's shoulder, guiding him back a step. "Go inside, sweetheart," she said quietly. "I'll be there in a moment." The boy hesitated, reluctant to leave, but finally obeyed, disappearing into the living room. The sound of his footsteps retreating left Ethan and Claire alone in the silence of the open doorway. Claire's eyes locked onto Ethan's, a storm of emotions swirling in their depths. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low but firm. Ethan inhaled slowly, his chest aching. "I had to see you. I had to see him," he admitted, each word heavy. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I waited too long. But I couldn't stay away anymore." Her expression hardened. 8 years, Ethan, 8 years without a single visit, a single phone call, not even a letter, and now you show up at my door like none of it happened? The shame in her voice cut him deeply. He lowered his gaze, unable to hold her stare. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said quietly. "I wanted to give you both a better life, something secure. I told myself I would come back when I had something to offer. But the years kept passing, and the more time that slipped away, the harder it became to face you. Her hand clenched around the towel, her knuckles white. You don't get to excuse 8 years of silence with ambition, Ethan. We needed you, not your money, not your empire. We needed you here. The words echoed in his chest, sharper than any criticism he had ever faced in boardrooms or headlines. He had faced rivals, lawsuits, betrayals in business, but none of it compared to this. This was the truth he had run from, staring him in the face. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. "And I'm sorry, Claire. More sorry than I can ever say." For a long moment, she said nothing. The air between them was thick with anger, regret, and something else neither dared to name. She finally paused, shaking her head. "You should go," she said softly. But Ethan didn't move. His feet felt rooted to the porch. "Please," he said, his tone desperate. "Just let me see him. Let me try, even if it's too late. I don't want to disappear again. I can't." Claire studied him, her eyes searching for sincerity, for truth. The weight of the past 8 years lingered heavily between them, and she looked as though she was fighting between slamming the door and opening it wider. Finally, she stepped back slightly, her voice tired but resigned. "Come in." Ethan exhaled shakily, stepping into the house he had once dreamed of, filling with laughter and memories. It felt different now, warmer, more lived in, but also foreign to him. He glanced around, catching glimpses of family photos on the walls, pictures of Liam growing up without him. Each one was a reminder of what he had missed, what he had lost. As the door closed behind him, Ethan realized there was no turning back. The unplanned return had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The door creaked as it opened, slow at first, as though whoever stood behind it had been reluctant to answer. Ethan stood on the porch, his hands heavy in his pockets, his breath catching at the simple sound of the latch sliding back. 8 years, endless years, were about to collapse into this single moment. When the door finally swung wide enough, there she was. Claire. Her hair, once chestnut brown that shimmered under the summer sun, now held streaks of silver. But her eyes, those piercing hazel eyes, were the same, only sharper, colder, lined with years of wear. She froze in the doorway, her expression unmoving, her hand gripping the frame so tightly her knuckles blanched. Ethan couldn't speak at first. His chest tightened, as though the sight of her knocked all the words out of him. He had imagined this reunion 1,000 times on sleepless nights, imagined Claire's face filled with surprise, maybe even anger. But standing here now, her silence and stillness cut deeper than any words. He finally managed, his voice low, nearly breaking. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, a small gasp slipped out, the kind that escaped before you had the chance to swallow it back. She blinked once, twice, as though needing to confirm that he was real and not some phantom from the past. Behind her, small footsteps echoed against the hallway floor. Ethan's gaze flickered past her shoulder, and there he was. A boy. Their boy? Liam. He was taller than Ethan expected, his thin frame framed by the door's shadow, his hair a darker shade of Claire's, messy and sticking out in tufts. His eyes, wide with curiosity, mirrored Ethan's own. The same deep gray Ethan saw in the mirror every morning. But the boy didn't know him. He didn't recognize the man standing on the porch. To Liam, Ethan was just a stranger. "Mom." Liam's voice was tentative, questioning. "Who's that?" Words tore through Ethan like shards of glass. He had imagined being called Dad again after so many years, imagined the sound of his son's voice speaking to him with familiarity. But now, he was simply that, a stranger. Claire shifted slightly, her shoulders squaring, her body almost shielding Liam, as if she needed to put distance between her son and the man who had abandoned them. Her silence, however, was louder than any accusation. Ethan started, his throat tightening. He tried again. "Can we talk?" The question hung heavy in the air. Claire's brows knitted together, her eyes narrowing, suspicion tightening every line of her face. For a moment, Ethan thought she might slam the door shut and leave him on the porch forever. Then Leah, still lingering in the hallway, tilted his head and whispered just loudly enough, "Mom, who is he?" Claire's lips trembled before she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. He's someone from the past. It was enough to sting Ethan. More than sting, it hollowed him out. Someone from the past. Was that all he was to her now? To his son? Ethan straightened, his jaw tightening. He couldn't let it end like this, not after finally working up the courage to return. Please, Claire, he said softly. Just a few minutes. That's all I'm asking. Her eyes locked with his, a silent war raging between anger and weariness. For years, she had raised Liam on her own, borne the weight of Ethan's absence, and fought to piece together a life without him. And now, here he was, standing on her doorstep with guilt dripping from every word. Her instinct told her to shut the door, to protect the little stability she had managed to build. But Liam's gaze tugged at her heart. The boy looked between them with a mix of confusion and curiosity, sensing the tension but not understanding the history behind it. Claire stepped aside, her hand still clinging to the edge of the door. Her voice was flat, controlled. 5 minutes. Ethan exhaled, a rush of air leaving him in relief. He stepped inside slowly, careful, as though afraid his very presence might shatter the fragile walls of this home. The house was modest but warm, the kind of place that smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. The furniture bore signs of wear, the fabric on the couch faded, the wooden coffee table scuffed at the edges, but it radiated a quiet sense of resilience like its owner. Liam retreated slightly, slipping closer to the living room while still keeping his distance, his eyes never leaving Ethan. He clutched a toy car in his hand, absent-mindedly rolling it back and forth as though it gave him comfort in the strangeness of the moment. Ethan's gaze softened, his chest aching at the sight. So much of Liam's childhood had passed without him. The birthdays, the scraped knees, the school plays, moments he could never get back. He turned back to Claire. "Thank you," he murmured, but she didn't respond. Instead, she folded her arms, her stance guarded, her eyes sharp. "Do," she said at last, her voice laced with ice. "You're back, after 8 years. Why?" The question hit him like a blow. Why now? Why after all this time? He had rehearsed answers in his mind for years, but now that it mattered, the words— "I don't expect forgiveness," Ethan said carefully, his voice low but steady. I needed to see you. To see him." His eyes flickered toward Liam, who stood half-admitted behind the couch. Claire's jaw tightened. "You don't get to just walk back into our lives because you feel like it. You made your choice years ago." "I know," Ethan whispered. His shoulders sagged under the weight of her words, "and I regret it every single day." Her silence cut deeper than any reply. Ethan's hands fidgeted in his pockets, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He looked around the small living room again, trying to take in every detail, as though memorizing the life he had missed. Liam edged forward slightly, curiosity overriding hesitation. "Mom? Do you know him?" The innocence in the question pierced through the tension. Claire hesitated, her eyes flickering with something softer before she steeled herself again. "Yes," she said quietly. "I know him." Ethan took a cautious step forward, lowering himself slightly to meet Liam's height. "Hi," he said gently, his voice warm but unsure. I'm Ethan." He stopped himself from saying more. He wanted to say, "your father," but he didn't know if he had the right anymore. And Liam blinked, studying him with wide gray eyes. "Hi," he replied after a moment, his tone cautious but not unfriendly. The single syllable sent a flood of warmth and pain through Ethan. It was the first word his son had ever spoken to him in years, and it felt like both a gift and a punishment. Claire's arms tightened across her chest. "You can say what you came here to say, Ethan, and then you should leave." Her words stung, but he nodded. He had expected hostility, prepared himself for it. What he hadn't prepared for was the ache of standing in the same room as his son and not knowing how to bridge the gap between them. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry," Ethan said, his voice steady now, his eyes locked on Claire. "For everything. For not being here when you needed me most. I thought I was doing the right thing, chasing success, making something of myself so I could provide. But in the process, I lost the only things that ever truly mattered." Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. You think saying sorry erases 8 years of silence? Do you have any idea what those years were like for us? Ethan shook his head slowly. I can only imagine, and that's the hardest part, that I wasn't here to know, to help, to be there for either of you. The weight of his confession lingered in the room, but Claire didn't soften. She had built walls around her heart, and one apology wasn't enough to bring them down. Liam, sensing the heaviness, stepped closer, his small voice breaking the silence. Are you a friend of Mom's? Ethan's throat tightened. He swallowed hard before answering. Something like that. Claire's eyes glistened for just a second before she turned away, hiding it. That's enough, she said firmly. You've had your 5 minutes. Ethan looked at her, then at Liam, his heart tearing in two. He wanted to fight for more time, to beg her not to push him away again, but he also knew this wasn't his decision anymore. He had made his choices long ago. He nodded slowly. Thank you, he said, softly, the words directed to both of them. He turned toward the door, his steps heavy, each one feeling like a door slamming shut on the life he had once abandoned. Just as he reached for the handle, Liam's small voice called out behind him, "Wait." Ethan froze, his hand hovering over the door. He turned back, his eyes meeting Liam's curious gaze. "Will you come back again?" the boy asked, his voice tentative but filled with something Ethan hadn't expected. Claire's breath caught. She turned sharply toward her son, but the question was already out in the open, hanging between them like a fragile thread. Ethan's lips trembled. He wanted to promise yes, to swear he'd never leave again. But he looked at Claire, at the guarded pain in her eyes, and he knew it wasn't his promise to make. I'd like to, he said carefully, his voice soft, almost breaking. If it's okay with your mom. Liam glanced up at Claire, his eyes wide, silently pleading. Claire's heart clenched. She wanted to protect him, to shield him from disappointment. But she also couldn't ignore the longing in her son's face. The longing for something she had always known he would want someday. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping. We'll see, she said quietly. It wasn't permission, but it wasn't rejection either. It was the thinnest sliver of possibility. Ethan nodded, his chest tightening with a bittersweet ache. That's all I can ask. He opened the door, stepping back out into the evening air, the weight of the moment pressing heavy on his shoulders. But as he looked back one last time, his eyes met Liam's, and in that brief exchange, in that single, hopeful glance, Ethan felt something shift. The door closed behind him, but for the first time in 8 years, he didn't feel completely shut out. Claire stood in the kitchen, her arms folded tightly across her chest, as if she needed the barrier to shield herself. Ethan sat at the small wooden table, his hands resting flat on its surface, trying not to fidget. The silence stretched, heavy and brittle. The ticking of the old clock on the wall filled the room like a drumbeat of all the years. You've missed a lot, Claire finally said. Her eyes were fixed on a crack in the tiled floor rather than on him. No, Ethan admitted softly. He wanted to say more, but the weight of his own failures clamped his throat. She turned toward the stove, busying herself with a teapot. The metal clinked against the counter, sharper than necessary, but it helped her keep her emotions in check. 8 years is not just a little time, Ethan. It's his entire childhood. First steps, first words, school plays, nightmares, all of it. You weren't there? Ethan swallowed, nodding. I regret every single day I wasn't. I thought building a future would somehow make it worth it, but I was wrong. I missed the most important years of my life. Claire didn't answer. She poured hot water into 2 chipped mugs, her movements mechanical. Liam peeked in from the hallway again, eyes wide and uncertain. His mother's sharp tone told him he shouldn't interrupt, but his curiosity pulled him closer. Ethan caught sight of him and offered a small smile, but Liam quickly ducked back behind the wall. Ethan's heart ached at the rejection, though he couldn't blame the boy. Why should Liam welcome someone who had been nothing but absent? The teapot hissed as Claire set it down. She slid 1 mug across the table toward him, though she didn't look up. You left us with nothing, do you know that? I had to sell my piano just to cover rent that first year. I went from teaching part-time to working double shifts at the diner. And all that while explaining to a little boy why his father wasn't around. Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and Ethan felt the sting deep in his chest. "Claire, I didn't know it was that bad. I thought—" She cut him off, raising her gaze sharply at last. Her eyes, though tired, still burned. "No, you didn't think. You just left." The truth in her words left him mute. His empire, his wealth, his mansions and cars, none of it excused what he had done. He had abandoned the very people who had once been his world. The sound of small footsteps pulled their attention to the hallway. Liam emerged again, holding a half-finished drawing in his hands. He looked at Ethan, then at his mother. "Mom? Is he really my dad?" Claire froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came. It was Ethan who finally nodded, his voice breaking. "Yes, I'm your dad, Liam." The boy studied him for a long moment, searching for answers in a face he had only ever seen in old photographs. Then he frowned. "Why didn't you come before?" Ethan leaned forward slightly, but not too close, careful not to overwhelm him. "Because I made mistakes. Big mistakes. I thought chasing success was more important than being here, and I was wrong. I should have been with you and your mom every single day. I can't change the past, but I'm here now, and I want to know you. If you'll let me." Liam didn't respond. He simply looked down at his drawing again, clutching it like a shield. After a long pause, he handed it silently to his mother and retreated upstairs. The silence returned, heavier than before. Claire set the drawing aside and sat down opposite Ethan. "You don't just walk back in and fix everything overnight," she said quietly. "It doesn't work that way." "I know," Ethan whispered. His eyes were moist, though he blinked hard to hide it. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything, really. I just hope for a chance to prove that I've changed, that I still care, for both of you." Claire's shoulders sagged slightly, the years of exhaustion etched into her posture. "Words are easy, Ethan. Promises are easy. But the scars? Those scars." Claire's shoulders slumped. "I learned to live without you. Liam learned to live without you. And now you show up, expecting us to smile? Welcome you back like nothing happened?" Her words stung, but he didn't argue. She had every right to feel this way. "I don't expect that," he said. "I just want a chance to try." Claire studied him for a long moment, searching for sincerity. What she saw unsettled her. He looked older, yes, but also worn, almost hollowed out. Success had gilded his life, but it hadn't filled it. For the first time in years, she thought she saw the man she had once loved, buried under layers of mistakes and regrets. And that scared her even more. The hours dragged on slowly as they sat together, the air dense with unsaid words. Ethan tried to take in the details of the home, details he had ignored when it was once theirs. The faded wallpaper, the small bookshelf stacked with children's novels and old recipe books. Life had continued here without him, quietly but firmly, like a tree growing stubbornly in rocky soil. "You've done an incredible job," Ethan finally said, raising him, holding everything together. Claire let out a soft, bitter laugh. "I didn't have a choice. You think I wanted to explain to a 5-year-old why his father didn't show up at the school concert? Or why all the other dads came to soccer practice and his didn't? No, Ethan. I didn't want to do any of it alone. But I had to." Her voice wavered, and Ethan felt his own throat tighten. "I can't undo that pain. I wish I could. But I want to start being here now. For him. For you, if you'll let me." Claire shook her head, staring into her mug as if it held answers. "You say that now, but what happens when the next business deal pulls you away? Or when life gets complicated again? Do you run? Do you leave us standing in the ruins, like before?" Ethan said firmly, the words sharp as steel. "I'm done running. I've built enough, I have more than I'll ever need. None of it matters without family. Without him. Without—" He stopped himself, not daring to say more, not wanting to burden her with words she wasn't ready to hear. For the first time, Claire looked at him with something other than anger. Though it wasn't forgiveness either. It was uncertainty, perhaps even fear of believing again. From upstairs came the faint creak of floorboards. Liam had been listening, Ethan realized. A small flicker of hope lit in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, the boy cared enough to want answers. Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. This isn't a conversation we finish in one night. You should go. Ethan's heart sank, but he nodded. I'll go, but can I come back? Tomorrow, maybe? Just to talk or see him. I don't want to push, but I want him to know I mean this. She hesitated. We'll see. I'll talk to him. If he wants that, I won't stop him. Ethan stood slowly, every movement weighted with reluctance. He glanced once more at the stairs, wishing his son would come running down, wishing for some small sign of acceptance. But the house remained quiet. At the door, Claire held it open without another word. The night air rushed in, cool and sharp, carrying with it the smell of rain-soaked earth. Ethan stepped outside, his chest heavy. Before he left, he turned back, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, for everything you've done for him, for surviving all of this. Claire didn't reply. She simply closed the door, leaving him standing on the porch, the sound of the latch clicking like a final verdict. Ethan walked back to his car, each step echoing the weight of the years lost. But beneath the despair, a faint determination stirred. He had faced empires, rivals, and fortunes. Now, he faced something far more terrifying, the walls of a family he had broken. And he knew he would do whatever it took to tear those walls down, brick by brick, until his son, and perhaps even Claire, could see the truth in him again. Ethan stood in the living room, his eyes lingering on the small framed drawings pinned to the wall. Crayon sketches of rockets, soccer fields, and little stick figures holding hands. They were simple, yet vibrant with life. He recognized the careful hand of a child pouring all his imagination onto paper. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a pang in his chest. He wondered how many of those moments he had already lost. Liam peeked around the hallway, curiosity plain in his young eyes, though caution still held him back. Ethan knew he couldn't just step into his son's world with an easy smile and expect to be welcomed. The silence between them stretched, weighted with 8 years of absence, but Ethan's instincts, perhaps guided by guilt and longing, told him he had to try something gentle, something that spoke Liam's language. He crouched slightly, softening his voice. Liam, do you maybe want to go out for ice cream with me? Claire, standing in the corner, crossed her arms but didn't intervene. Her gaze was steady, as though silently reminding Ethan that trust wasn't given freely. Liam blinked, caught between uncertainty and the allure of a treat. He shifted from foot to foot, then glanced at his mother. Can I, Mom? Liam's voice was small, but there was a glimmer in it. Claire hesitated, her protective instinct warring with the knowledge that Liam deserved the chance to decide for himself. Finally, she nodded. If you want to, but only if you want to. That was enough. Liam gave the smallest shrug, trying not to show excitement, but his eyes betrayed him. Ethan smiled softly and extended his hand, though he didn't push when Liam didn't take it. Instead, they walked out together, a careful distance kept between them. The car ride was quiet at first. Ethan tried not to fill the silence too quickly, letting Liam set the pace. Eventually, he glanced sideways and said, There's a shop near here that used to be my favorite when I was your age. Still open, I think. They made the best chocolate fudge sundaes. Liam's head tilted, curiosity flickering. Better than the place by the school? Ethan chuckled, surprised by the boy's quick challenge. You'll have to be the judge of that. The corner shop hadn't changed much. A small bell jingled above the door as they stepped inside, the sweet smell of waffle cones filling the air. Ethan ordered a simple scoop of vanilla for himself, but Liam studied the menu like it was a test. After a moment of thought, he pointed to a towering cone stacked with 2 flavors and sprinkles on top. You've got good taste, Ethan said lightly, passing the cone to him. They sat in a booth near the window, the afternoon sunlight spilling across the table. Liam dug into his ice cream, still cautious but beginning to relax. Ethan watched, careful not to overwhelm him with questions. It was Liam who broke the silence. So, what do you do? Ethan paused. The truth was complicated. CEO, millionaire, the man who had sacrificed family for success. None of those words felt right to give a 10-year-old boy. He smiled, faintly. I work with a lot of people, helping build businesses, but it mostly means I sit in a lot of meetings. Liam wrinkled his nose. That sounds boring. Ethan laughed, caught off guard by the honesty. "You're not wrong." "What do you like then?" Liam asked, leaning forward a little. That simple question pierced deeper than Ethan expected. For so long, his life had been consumed by numbers, deadlines, and acquisitions. What did he like? His mind drifted, then he found himself answering honestly. "When I was your age, I loved drawing. I used to sit in my room for hours sketching cards and airplanes." Liam's eyes lit up. "I like drawing too. I draw rockets and sometimes superheroes. Want to see?" The boy pulled a folded sheet from his backpack, carefully smoothing it out on the table. It showed a rocket blasting into space, flames streaming behind it. Ethan studied the details, impressed by the bold strokes and imagination. "This is incredible, Liam," Ethan said sincerely. "You've got real talent." A small smile crept onto Liam's face, hesitant but proud. For the first time, a fragile thread of connection began to weave between them. He spent the next half hour talking about Liam's favorite soccer team, the experiments he tried in science class, even his dream of becoming an astronaut one day. Ethan listened intently, feeling the years of missed birthdays and milestones settle heavily on his heart. But he didn't let the guilt drown him. Instead, he stayed present, absorbing every word, storing it like... When Liam laughed at one of Ethan's clumsy jokes about fumbling a soccer ball back in school, the sound was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Ethan smiled back, savoring the small but genuine moment. For the first time in 8 years, he felt like he belonged, not as a businessman, not as a millionaire, but simply as a father sharing ice cream with his son. Step out of their coats were gone, Liam tapped his spoon on the table, studying Ethan with curious eyes. "Why didn't you come before?" he asked suddenly, the innocence of the question sharpened by its weight. Ethan's chest tightened. He searched for words that would be true, but not too heavy for a boy's shoulders. "I made mistakes, Liam. I thought I had to chase something important, and I forgot that the most important thing was right here. I can't change the past, but I want to do better now." Taylor whispered. Liam didn't respond right away. He looked out the window, kicking his feet against the booth seat. Finally, he muttered, "Mom said you were busy. Really busy." "She was right," Ethan admitted. "But I should have made time. I should have been here for both of you." The boy's silence was thoughtful, not rejecting. Ethan let it rest, not pushing further. He knew trust would take time. When they left the shop, Liam walked a little closer than before. On the way back, Ethan pointed out landmarks from his own childhood. The park where he'd played soccer, the corner store where he'd spent his allowance. Liam listened, half interested, half amused, by the idea that his father had once been just another boy in this same town. As they neared the house, Liam asked, "Can we do this again?" The words nearly undid Ethan. He forced himself to stay calm, smiling gently. "I'd like that very much." Back at the house, Claire opened the door before they knocked, her arms folded, but her expression softer than before. Liam bounded past her, chattering about the ice cream flavors and proudly showing her the rocket drawing Ethan had admired. Claire's eyes flicked to Ethan, and for a brief second, something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement that perhaps, just perhaps, the walls between them were not unbreakable. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel. For the first time in years, his heart felt full and fragile all at once. He realized that wealth, success, and status had never filled the void left by Liam's absence. A single smile from his son had accomplished what millions could not. The next days unfolded slowly, each visit with Liam adding another fragile thread of connection. Sometimes they went to the park, kicking a soccer ball back and forth. Other times they stayed in, sketching side by side at the kitchen table. Liam's questions grew bolder, his laughter freer. One afternoon, while Ethan was clumsily chasing the soccer ball, Liam burst into giggles. "You're really bad at this," he teased. Ethan laughed, doubling over, not even trying to deny it. "Guess I'll have to practice if I want to keep up with you." In those moments, something shifted. The boy who had once eyed him with distance now reached for his hand without hesitation when crossing the street. The man who had spent years drowning in regret now found himself rediscovering joy in the simple rhythm of fatherhood. Claire noticed too. Though still cautious, she couldn't ignore the way Liam's eyes lit up when Ethan was around, or the gentle patience Ethan showed. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine that perhaps this reunion wasn't just temporary. That perhaps Ethan truly meant what he said about wanting to do better. Ethan, for his part, didn't see it as repairing the past anymore. He knew he could never erase the pain of leaving, but he could build something new, brick by fragile brick, starting with ice cream, laughter, and the quiet wonder in his son's eyes. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Ethan felt a flicker of hope he hadn't allowed himself in years. A hope that maybe, just maybe, he could still be the father Liam deserved. The house was quiet after dinner. Liam had gone to his room with his sketchbook, leaving Claire and Ethan in the living room. The faint hum of the old refrigerator echoed from the kitchen, and the clock on the wall ticked steadily, filling the silence that seemed too heavy for both of them. Ethan shifted uncomfortably on the couch, his hands clasped together, his eyes downcast as though searching for the right words hidden in the patterns of the worn carpet. "Claire," he finally began, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I need to say something to you. Something I should have said years ago." She sat across from him in the armchair, her posture upright, her expression guarded. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, and she didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice carried a hint of wariness. "Go ahead. I'm listening." Ethan swallowed hard. "I was selfish. I was young, ambitious, and blind to what really mattered. I thought building my empire, making money, proving myself to the world. I thought that was everything, and in chasing it, I left you and Liam behind." Claire's eyes flickered with emotion, but she kept her tone steady. "That's putting it lightly. You didn't just leave, Ethan. You walked out. You chose your ambition over your family. Do you know what that did to us?" Her words hit like a strike to the chest, and Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "I do now. Back then, I told myself I'd come back once I had something to show, once I was successful enough. But the years slipped away, and the longer I stayed away, the harder it was to face you. It was cowardice, plain and simple." Claire exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening against each other. "Do you think saying that makes it better? That an apology now can erase years of birthdays, school events, nights Liam asked where his father was? Do you know how many times I had to hold him while he cried, not knowing how to answer his—" Ethan's chest ached with every word. "No, it doesn't erase it. And I won't pretend it does. Nothing I say can undo those years. I can't give them back to you or to him. But I can tell you the truth, and the truth is that I regret every single day I spent away. I regret walking out that door more than anything I've ever done." Claire's eyes shone, though she quickly blinked back the tears that threatened to fall. She refused to let herself break in front of him. "Regret doesn't raise a child, Ethan. Regret doesn't pay the bills or ease the loneliness. I had to do all of that without you." He nodded, shame pressing down on him. "I know. And I don't expect forgiveness. Not tonight, maybe not ever. But I need you to know that I'm not here out of pity or guilt alone. I'm here because I realize what I lost, and because I can't keep living with the distance I created." Claire leaned back, crossing her arms. "So what now? You walk back into our lives and expect us to just accept it? To pretend like nothing happened?" Ethan said firmly, shaking his head. "I don't expect that. I know it's not that simple. I know I've lost the right to expect anything from you. But I'm willing to earn it. To prove that I'm here, not for a day or a week, but for as long as it takes." The sincerity in his tone gave her pause. She studied him, her heart torn between anger, sorrow, and something she didn't want to admit, might be hope. "You say you're willing to prove it. What does that mean, Ethan? Because words are easy. You've always been good with words." He met her gaze, eyes steady. "It means showing up. Every day, for Liam. For you, if you'll let me. It means listening, being there, helping however I can. And never walking away again. I can erase the past, but I can build a different future. If you'll allow me to try." The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking clock. Claire looked away, her jaw tight. "You don't understand how hard it is to trust you again." You don't know how many walls I've had to build to survive without you." Ethan leaned forward, his hands open on his knees. "I don't want to break those walls down by force. I want to earn the right to be let in, brick by brick, however long it takes. Even if all I can be at first is someone Liam knows he can rely on." Her chest tightened at his words, but she wasn't ready to let him see the effect. "You should have thought of that years ago, when he was learning to walk, when he started school, when he asked why his dad wasn't there." Ethan's voice cracked. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for missing those moments. But I'm here now. Please, Claire, let me try." She closed her eyes, drawing in a deep breath. Her heart warred with her mind, against longing, hurt against the faint whisper of hope. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, and I don't know if Liam will ever accept you as his father. But I won't stop you from trying, for his sake." Relief washed over Ethan, though he knew this was only the beginning of a long road. "Thank you," he whispered. But Claire's gaze hardened again. "Don't thank me yet. Actions speak louder than words, Ethan, and after 8 years you have a lot to prove." The tension lingered, heavy and unyielding, but something had shifted. For the first time since he'd arrived, there was a crack in the wall she'd built between them. Ethan leaned back slightly, careful not to push too hard, sensing the fragility of the moment. "I mean it, Claire," he said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere this time, not unless you tell me to leave. I don't want to make promises I can't keep, but I know I can keep this one." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes scanning his face for any sign of insincerity. "Do you have any idea what it's like, raising a child who constantly wonders if he wasn't enough to keep his father around? Do you know how hard it was to answer him when he asked if you still loved him?" Ethan's throat tightened and his eyes burned. "I love him, Claire. I always have. I didn't know how to balance love with ambition. I thought I could make it up later, but there is no later. There's only now." Her lip trembled, though she quickly pressed it into a thin line. "He doesn't call anyone dad. He doesn't even use the word. Do you realize that?" The weight of her words settled on him like lead. He whispered, "Then maybe I can start by showing him what a dad is supposed to be. Not in name, but in action." Claire shook her head slightly, torn between disbelief and the faintest spark of cautious hope. "He's not a project for you to fix, Ethan. He's a child who's been hurt, and he needs consistency, not another disappointment." "I understand," Ethan said. "That's why I'm not asking for your trust right away. I'll earn it from both of you. No shortcuts, no grand gestures, just showing up. Day by day." The conviction in his tone unsettled her. She wanted to stay angry, to keep the walls intact, but she couldn't deny the small part of her that wanted to believe him, that wanted to believe he had changed. "Now?" she asked suddenly, her voice sharp. "Why after 8 years? What changed?" Ethan lowered his gaze, shame flickering across his face. "Because I finally realized that all the money, all the success, it means nothing without family. I've built everything I thought I wanted, but it feels empty. I've had more lonely nights in luxury than I can count, and every time I thought of you, of Liam, of what I threw away." Claire's breath caught, though she fought to keep her composure. "Do you know how many nights I cried, wishing you'd come back? Do you know how many times I hated myself for still hoping?" His voice broke. "And I hate myself for making you feel that way, for making you carry everything alone. If I could go back, I would change it all. But since I can't, all I can do is spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." The room fell silent, heavy with the weight of truths long buried. Claire's eyes glistened, though she blinked quickly, refusing to let the tears fall. "You can't just walk back into our lives and expect everything to fall into place. Trust doesn't work like that. And forgiveness isn't guaranteed." "You know," Ethan said softly, "and I don't expect it. But I'll be here however long it takes, even if all I ever get is the chance to be a part of Liam's life in some small way. It'll be more than I deserve." Her heart tightened at his humility. This was not the arrogant young man who had left all those years ago, but whether this change was permanent or just guilt-driven, she couldn't yet tell. Then start with him, she said firmly. Don't make promises to me. Show Liam who you are now. Show him you mean it, because if you break his heart, I won't forgive you. Ever. Ethan nodded, his eyes glistening. I understand. I won't let him down. Not again. For a moment, the silence softened, less hostile, more contemplative. The clock ticked on, steady as always, as if reminding them that time was still moving forward, and with it, perhaps, the chance. Claire leaned back, her body weary from the emotional weight of the conversation. We'll see, Ethan. Actions, not words. That's all I'm gonna say. Ethan offered a faint, almost broken smile. Then, that's what you'll get. Action. As the night settled deeper around them, neither spoke again. But in the silence, a fragile thread had been woven. Thin, tentative, but real. And for the first time in years, both of them dared to imagine that maybe, just maybe, something lost could be found again. The days following Ethan's private talk with Claire unfolded with a quiet, almost hesitant rhythm. Nothing shifted overnight. There were no sudden embraces or easy laughter. Instead, everything seemed to move in slow, deliberate increments, as though each step forward had to be measured and weighed against the pain of the past. Ethan began by showing up. That in itself was a monumental change. For years, his absence had been the unspoken wound, the reminder of promises broken. Now, instead of disappearing into the world of boardrooms and private jets, he appeared on Claire's doorstep in the late afternoons. He knocked gently, never assuming welcome. Sometimes Claire answered with guarded eyes, her expression a wall of composure. Other times, it was Liam who opened the door, peeking up at him with a curiosity that was beginning to outgrow suspicion. On one of those afternoons, Ethan noticed Liam struggling with a poster board spread across the kitchen table. The boy was frowning, a handful of colored markers scattered around him. Claire was at the sink, washing dishes, her movements efficient but tight, the way they often became when she was trying not to pay him too much attention. "What's this?" Ethan asked carefully, crouching down to Liam's level. "It's for science class," Liam muttered. "We're supposed to make a presentation on planets." Ethan's eyes softened. He remembered being a boy fascinated with the night sky, staring out his bedroom window at the same stars. "Planets, huh? That sounds exciting." Liam shrugged. "It's hard. The words don't fit on the board and the pictures look weird." "Mind if I help?" Ethan asked. He didn't push, didn't make it sound like a demand. There was a long pause before Liam finally gave a small, hesitant nod. Ethan slid into the chair beside him and began sketching simple circles, showing him how to space things out. He spoke softly, offering suggestions rather than taking over. Slowly, Liam leaned closer, curiosity overtaking caution. By the time Claire turned to check on them, the boy was laughing at the way Ethan drew Saturn with an exaggerated ring that looked more like a hula hoop. The laughter startled her. It was the first time she had heard that particular sound when Ethan was in the room. The following week, Ethan showed up at one of Liam's soccer practices. He stood quietly near the edge of the field, hands in his pockets, trying not to draw attention. At first, Liam barely looked at him, focused entirely on the ball at his feet. But halfway through practice, he stole a quick glance toward the sideline. When he saw Ethan still there, watching attentively, something flickered across his. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it wasn't indifference either. Afterward, when the coach dismissed the kids, Liam jogged toward Claire's car but slowed his steps near Ethan. The man crouched slightly, offering a gentle smile. "You played really well," Ethan said. "That goal you scored was incredible." Liam's lips twitched, almost like he wanted to smile back, but instead he just muttered, "Thanks," before running the rest of the way to the car. It was a small thing, just one word, but to Ethan it felt monumental. Bit by bit, he found ways to weave himself into their lives without making a spectacle of it. When the faucet in the kitchen started leaking, he returned the next day with a toolbox, quietly fixing it while Claire folded laundry in the other room. He didn't announce what he was doing, didn't make it sound like charity. He simply repaired what was broken, leaving the space better than he found it. Claire noticed. She didn't say much, but her silence shifted. It wasn't as sharp, wasn't as weighted with hostility. Sometimes, She even offered him a cup of tea while he worked. But last year at Christmas, when they were in Japan, she's still too fragile, but the edges between them softened. One Saturday morning, Ethan arrived to find Liam sitting on the porch steps with a sketch pad balanced on his knees. The boy was lost in concentration, his pencil moving quickly across the page. Ethan approached slowly, not wanting to intrude. "What are you drawing?" he asked. Liam tilted the pad just enough to show him. It was a rocket ship, detailed with panels, boosters, and a trail of smoke beneath it. The precision surprised Ethan. "That's incredible," he said honestly. "You've got real talent." Liam ducked his head, clearly embarrassed but secretly pleased. "I like drawing stuff like this. Space stuff." Ethan sat beside him. "When I was your age, I used to draw the same things. I even dreamed of being an astronaut once." Liam looked up at him, wide-eyed, as though trying to decide whether to believe him. Ethan chuckled softly. "It's true, but I wasn't as good as you. My rockets looked more like crooked pencils." That earned him a laugh, quick and genuine. For a moment, father and son sat shoulder to shoulder, the silence between them filled, not with distance, but with possibility. Claire watched from the window, her arms crossed. A part of her wanted to remain unmoved, to remind herself of all the years he had missed. Yet another part, quieter but persistent, saw something she hadn't expected: effort, patience, sincerity. Over the next several weeks, Ethan's presence became less of a disruption and more of a rhythm. He never came empty-handed, but what he brought wasn't wealth, it was time. He carried soccer balls instead of briefcases, school books instead of contracts. He learned that Liam's favorite ice cream flavor was mint chocolate chip, that his favorite subject was science, and that he secretly wanted to be an engineer when he grew up. One evening, after another long day at work, Claire found Ethan still sitting at the table with Liam, helping him piece together a cardboard model of the solar system. The boys' laughter echoed through the small house, and Claire leaned against the doorway, watching them with an expression she couldn't quite name. "I missed a planet," Ethan teased, holding up a small ball painted blue and green. "Earth deserves a spot, don't you think?" Liam snatched it back with a grin. "I was saving it for last. It's the most important one." Ethan's throat tightened at the words, the symbolism not lost on him. Another weekend, Ethan arrived with his sleeves rolled up, ready to tackle the broken fence in the backyard. Liam hovered nearby, eager to hand him nails or hold the boards in place. The work was simple but steady, the kind that left sweat on their brows and dirt under their fingernails. By the time they were done, the fence stood straighter than it had in years, and Liam beamed with pride at the part he played. That night, Claire found herself saying something she hadn't planned. "Thank you for fixing the fence." Ethan paused, caught off guard by the sincerity in her voice. "Of course, it's the least I can do." Her eyes softened just a fraction. For the first time in years, gratitude didn't feel bitter on her tongue. As spring turned into summer, Ethan began showing up at Liam's soccer games more regularly. He never shouted too loudly or tried to insert himself into the team's dynamics. Instead, he clapped from the sidelines, his pride evident but restrained. Liam began to look for him during games, his gaze scanning the crowd until it landed on Ethan. Every time he found him, a flicker of confidence lit his face. One afternoon, after a particularly close match, Liam ran toward the bleachers and thrust his sketch pad into Ethan's hands. "Look what I drew," he said breathlessly. Inside was a series of diagrams, rocket ships, planets, even a rough blueprint of a contraption that looked like a solar-powdered car. Ethan turned the pages carefully, his voice thick with awe. "You've got a brilliant mind, Liam. You could build these things one day." Liam's cheeks flushed, and he shuffled his feet, but his smile was unmistakable. "Do you really think so?" "So," Ethan said, without hesitation. Moments like these began stacking together, building a fragile but steady bridge between them. The walls that had once seemed insurmountable started to crack, allowing glimpses of something warmer, something stronger. Claire, though cautious, could no longer deny the changes she saw. Ethan was no longer the man who had walked away chasing wealth. He was here, present in the smallest details of their lives, earning his place not through grand gestures, but through consistency. One evening, as she tucked Liam into bed, the boy whispered, "Mom, do you think Dad's gonna stay this time?" The question pierced her heart. She wanted to shield him, to remind him of past disappointments, but she also couldn't ignore what she had witnessed. Stroking his hair gently, she said, "I think he's trying very hard to—" Downstairs, Ethan sat quietly at the kitchen table, unaware of the conversation happening above him. He traced his finger along the rim of his teacup, his mind heavy with determination. He knew trust couldn't be rushed, but he also knew that every small step mattered. For the first time in years, the house that had once felt closed to him now carried echoes of laughter, shared meals, and tentative hope. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, Ethan could feel it, the beginning of something new, born not from wealth, but from love rediscovered one small step at a time. The Saturday afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting golden streaks across the neighborhood soccer field. Ethan stood near the sidelines, watching Liam run up and down the field with a determination that made his chest tighten. He cheered loudly whenever his son touched the ball, clapping and shouting encouragement just like the other parent. But even as his voice carried across the field, part of him couldn't shake the quiet hope that one day Liam might not just see him as a man cheering. The game ended, and the kids gathered around their coach for a brief pep talk. Liam's face was flushed with excitement, his jersey damp with sweat. Ethan approached slowly, waiting until Liam looked up. For a moment their eyes met, dark brown mirroring his own. Liam smiled shyly, then jogged over, his small voice carrying words. "You saw me score, right, Dad?" The world seemed to stop. The noise of the field, the chatter of parents, even the whistle of the coach. It all blurred into silence. Ethan's throat tightened, his eyes burning as though the word had pierced straight into his soul. Dad. A single word, single yet weighty, carrying with it a decade of absence and longing. He swallowed hard, nodding as he bent down to meet Liam's gaze. "Miss Liam, I saw everything. And I've never been prouder." Liam grinned, his cheeks flushed pink from more than just running. He threw his arms around Ethan in a brief, almost awkward hug before pulling back to join his teammates. Ethan remained frozen in place, his chest rising and falling as though he had just climbed a mountain. The word Ethan remained in his mind, filling the empty spaces that had haunted him for years. Later that evening, back at Claire's home, Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he knocked on the kitchen doorframe. Claire was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of soup. She turned at the sound, her face soft in the glow of the overhead light. For weeks she had watched Ethan return again and again, each visit marked by patience and persistence. But tonight there was something different in his eyes, something vulnerable, raw, and unguarded. "Clear," Ethan began quietly, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. "Something happened today." "Liam," he called me. "Dad." Claire's spoon paused mid-stir, her expression unreadable. She set it down slowly, leaning back against the counter. For a long time, neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the soft simmering from the pot. Then, almost imperceptibly, Claire's lips curved into the faintest smile. Him again, her voice trembling slightly. "He was so excited when he came inside. He kept talking about how you saw his goal." Ethan's eyes glistened as he stepped closer. "Claire, I know I can't erase the years I missed. I can't give back the nights you spent alone or the mornings Liam woke up without me there. But I want to do more than just visit. I want to give him stability, a home where he can thrive." Her gaze sharpened slightly, guarded again. "What do you mean?" Ethan hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded a set of documents. He placed them gently on the counter, sliding them toward her. Claire glanced down, her brow furrowing as she scanned the words. "House," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "As Ethan said firmly, though his tone carried more emotion than authority. "It's not charity, Claire. It's not a way of erasing guilt. I bought it because Liam deserves more than patchwork furniture and leaky faucets. He deserves space to grow, a place where he can bring friends over without feeling embarrassed. And you deserve a home where you can breathe again." Claire stared at the papers, her chest rising and falling rapidly. For years she had managed with what little she had, making ends meet, patching up broken things, and sacrificing dreams so Liam wouldn't feel the lack. And now, standing before her, the man who once walked away was offering something she had quietly wished for countless nights. But wishes didn't erase scars. "Thea," she said carefully, her voice trembling despite her effort to remain composed. "You can't just walk back in and buy forgiveness with walls and a roof. Do you think a bigger house will undo what Liam went through all these years?" "Beer again," Ethan admitted instantly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't believe that. This isn't about forgiveness. This is about building a future. You don't have to forgive me today, tomorrow, or ever, if that's how you feel. But please, let me give Liam a chance at something better. Let me give him what I should have given him from the start. A home where he knows he's loved and secure." Claire's eyes filled with tears as she looked away, fighting the storm inside her. Part of her wanted to reject the gesture outright, to remind him of every tear she had shed, every lonely night she had endured. But another part, the part that still carried echoes of the man she once loved, wanted to believe that this wasn't just another promise waiting to be broken. She drew in a deep breath, steadying herself before meeting his gaze again. "I don't know if I can trust this yet, but, for Liam's sake, I'll at least go see it." Relief washed over Ethan's face, his shoulders sagging as though a weight had been lifted. He nodded gratefully. "That's all I'm asking. Just give it a chance. Give us a chance." The next afternoon, Ethan drove Claire and Liam across town. Liam pressed his face to the window, excitement bubbling in his voice as he peppered Ethan with questions. "Is it big? Does it have a yard? Can I paint my room blue?" Ethan chuckled softly, glancing in the rearview mirror. "You'll see soon enough, but yes, there's a yard, and yes, you can paint your room however you like." Claire sat quietly in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She stared out the window, her mind torn between skepticism and cautious hope. Ethan had always been a man of grand gestures, and she couldn't help but wonder if this was just another one, something bright and shiny that might not last. When they pulled into the driveway, Liam gasped. The house stood tall, a warm brick exterior framed by neatly trimmed hedges and a sprawling front yard. The windows glistened in the afternoon light, and a swing hung gently from the branch of a sturdy oak tree. To Liam, it looked like something from a dream. "Wow!" he exclaimed, bursting out of the car and running up the walkway. "This is ours?" Ethan smiled faintly, his heart swelling at the sight. "It's yours, Liam. It's ours." Claire followed more slowly, her eyes scanning every detail with a mix of wonder and disbelief. The house was beautiful, yes, but beauty alone didn't guarantee stability. Still, as she stepped inside, she was met with sunlight streaming through wide windows, polished wood floors, and the faint smell of fresh paint. Liam darted from room to room, his laughter echoing through the halls. "This one's mine," he shouted from the upstairs bedroom. "It's huge. I can put my desk right here and draw all day." Ethan and Claire followed, standing in the doorway as Liam twirled in the middle of the empty space. His joy was undeniable, unfiltered, and contagious. Ethan glanced at Claire, his voice low but steady. "This is what I want for him. Not luxury, not excess, just a place where he feels safe, where his dreams—" Claire's throat tightened as she watched Liam's happiness unfold before her. She wanted to remain guarded, to remind herself that Ethan had left once and could leave again. But as she saw her son's face glow with excitement, she felt the first cracks forming in the walls she had built around her heart. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the house. Ethan pointed out the kitchen with its wide counters, the living room perfect for family gatherings, and the backyard where he imagined Liam kicking a soccer ball or chasing fireflies on summer nights. At one point, Claire found herself standing in what would be her room. The walls were bare, the air still new. She ran her hand along the windowsill, feeling the smooth wood beneath her fingers. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to imagine mornings filled with laughter instead of loneliness, evenings with company instead of silence. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Liam tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Dad, can we stay here tonight?" The words struck Ethan again with powerful force. "Dad," he blinked rapidly, hiding the moisture gathering in his eyes. Not tonight, buddy. We still have to move things in. But soon, very soon. Liam groaned but quickly broke into a grin. Okay, but I'm calling this room before anyone else. Claire laughed softly, the sound surprising even herself. She caught Ethan watching her, his eyes filled with something deeper than hope, something close to gratitude. On the drive back, the car was filled with Liam's excited chatter, every sentence beginning with, "When we move in." Claire remained quieter, but her silence wasn't the same as before. It was thoughtful, tinged with something almost like acceptance. When they reached her home, she lingered by the car as Liam rushed inside. Ethan stood by the driver's door, his posture uncertain. Finally, Claire turned to him, her voice steady but gentle. "I still don't know what the future holds, Ethan. I can't promise you anything, but I see how much Liam means to you now, and that matters more than you know." Ethan's eyes softened, his voice trembling with sincerity. "Claire, I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for chances to show you, to show him, that I'm here to stay this time." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Then, with a small nod, Claire whispered, "We'll see." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a door opening, just enough for hope to slip through. And for Ethan, that single crack of light was more than enough to keep moving. The morning of the move dawned bright and calm, as if the world itself understood the significance of the day. Ethan arrived early, his car packed not just with tools and supplies, but with a quiet eagerness that had grown steadily over the past weeks. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't running from anything or towards some far-off ambition. He was simply arriving for his son, for his ex-wife, and for the new chapter they were about to begin together. The modest house Claire and Liam had lived in stood quietly in the morning light, its paint faded, its shutters loose. Ethan had memorized every crack in the driveway, every squeak of the gate, every uneven brick on the porch over the past weeks of visits. Today, though, he didn't see it as the place of regret and distance. He saw it as the place where their story was changing. Liam burst out the front door, backpack bouncing on his shoulders, his small hands tugging a box nearly half his size. "Dad, I got the books," he called with a wide grin, his voice loud and clear, unbothered by the weight in his arms. The words still stunned Ethan every time, filling his chest with both ache and joy. Ethan hurried to him, quickly setting down the toolbox he carried. "Hey, careful there, champ, let me take that one." But Liam shook his head, a stubborn determination in his eyes. "No, I can do it. It's just books. I want to help." Ethan smiled, recognizing that stubborn streak. It reminded him of himself at that age, except Liam's resolve wasn't born of ambition or pride. It was born of love, of wanting to take part in this moment, to make the move theirs. Ethan reached out, steadying the box while letting Liam carry it inside the van. A small gesture of shared effort. Claire appeared next, her arms full of kitchen dishes wrapped in towels. She looked at Ethan, her expression calm, less guarded than it had been in the early days of his return. "You're early," she said softly. "Curtain wait," Ethan replied, keeping his tone light, though every word carried weight. "Big day." For a moment, their eyes met, not with the sharpness of old wounds, but with a quiet recognition of how far they'd come. Claire gave a small nod, as if acknowledging not only his words but his presence, his consistency, the proof that he was no longer just visiting, but staying. The morning unfolded in a rhythm of laughter, effort, and small discoveries. Liam made a game of racing boxes to the van, giggling when Ethan pretended to struggle with lighter loads. Claire directed what went where, her voice steady, practical, yet occasionally touched with amusement at her son. At one point, as Ethan carried out an old lamp with a cracked shade, he paused. "Do you still want this?" he asked, half expecting her to dismiss it. Claire looked at it for a moment, then smiled faintly. "It was my mother's. It stays." Ethan nodded, tucking it safely between heavier boxes. It was a small reminder that, though they were moving forward, some pieces of the past deserved to come along, cherished rather than abandoned. By noon, the van was nearly full. Liam sat on the porch steps, sipping a juice box, his hair damp with sweat and sticking to his forehead. Ethan sat beside him, handing him a bottle of water. For a few quiet minutes, they just watched the house, the place that had held so much pain, survival, and quiet endurance. Liam said suddenly, "I used to wonder what it would be like to move somewhere else. Somewhere with more space. Somewhere with a backyard big enough to play soccer without hitting the fence." Ethan felt the weight of those words, not just as a wish from a boy, but as an unspoken reflection of years lived in limits. He put an arm around Liam's shoulders, gentle but firm. "Well, champ, you won't have to wonder anymore. Today, you get that backyard." Liam leaned into him, his small body radiating trust and excitement. It was the kind of moment Ethan had once thought impossible, but now it felt natural, earned by the steady steps of rebuilding. When the van doors finally shut, Claire locked the front door one last time. She stood still for a moment, keys clutched in her hand, her eyes sweeping over the house that had been both sanctuary and prison. Ethan didn't speak, didn't push her to move faster. He let her take the time she needed. Finally, she turned, slipping the keys into her pocket, and walked toward the car where Liam waited. The drive to the new house felt different from any drive Ethan had taken before. No rush of business deals, no pressure of deadlines, just the steady hum of the road, the quiet anticipation of new beginnings. Liam chattered in the back seat about where his drawings would go, how he'd set up a corner for his soccer trophies someday. Claire listened quietly, her lips curving into a small smile at his excitement. When they finally pulled up to the new house, Liam's gasp filled the car. The two-story home stood proud, its white siding gleaming, its porch wide and welcoming, its backyard stretching out like a field of possibilities. Ethan had chosen it carefully, not too grand, not ostentatious, but comfortable, warm, a place to grow. Liam was out of the car in an instant, running across the yard, arms stretched wide as if claiming it as his own. "It's huge!" he shouted, his voice echoing with joy. "Mom, look. Dad, come see the backyard." Claire stepped out slowly, her gaze sweeping over the house, her breath catching, as if she wasn't sure she deserved this new beginning. Ethan walked beside her, quiet, letting her take it in. Finally, she looked at him, her voice low, almost hesitant. "It's beautiful." Ethan swallowed, the emotion heavy in his throat. "It's yours, both of yours. I just wanted Liam to have a place where he could dream without limits, and a place where you could breathe easier." Claire studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching for any trace of arrogance or hidden agenda. But all she found was sincerity. Slowly she nodded, her shoulders softening. "Thank you," she said, the words simple yet powerful. Ethan didn't push for more. He just smiled, relief washing through him. This wasn't about erasing the past or winning her back. It was about giving them a future. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and possibilities. Boxes were unloaded, laughter filled the rooms, and the echo of footsteps on hardwood floors became the soundtrack of their new beginning. For Ethan, every moment was a reminder. This was not a transaction, not a deal to close. It was a life to build, brick by brick, laugh by laugh, trust by trust. And as the sun dipped lower, casting warm light across the walls, the house no longer felt like just a house. It was a home. By late afternoon, the house was alive with movement. The living room filled with stacks of boxes labeled in Liam's handwriting, the kitchen counters crowded with pots and mismatched dishes, the bedrooms echoing with the sound of furniture being pushed into place. But instead of feeling chaotic, it felt alive, like every corner of the home was waking up to laughter and promise. Ethan carried a heavy box of books up the stairs, his muscles straining but his heart light. When he set it down in Liam's new room, he paused to look around. Posters of spaceships and superheroes already lined the walls, tacked up with the help of tape and an eager pair of hands. The bed, though still unmade, had a stack of pillows thrown across it. At the window, Liam stood, gazing out at the yard below, where the grass stretched wide and open. "Big enough for a soccer goal, don't you think?" Ethan asked, leaning on the doorframe. Liam's eyes lit up. "Yeah, and maybe even a treehouse. Do you think we could build one?" Ethan smiled, the idea sparking something in him. "Absolutely, we'll build it together." The word "together" lingered in the air, more powerful than either of them realized. Liam turned and threw his arms around Ethan, quick and fierce, as if the excitement of the day had boiled over into gratitude he couldn't hold in. Ethan held him close, blinking back the sudden sting in his eyes. Downstairs, Claire was unpacking the kitchen, methodically placing plates in cabinets and utensils in drawers. Ethan joined her, helping lift a box of pans onto the counter. For a few minutes, they worked side by side in silence, the quiet, comfortable, rather than strained. "You've done a lot," Claire finally said, her tone thoughtful. "Not just with the house, but with Liam, with all of this." Ethan wiped his hands on a towel, meeting her gaze carefully. "I just want to be here, not in words, not in promises, in actions. Every day." Her expression softened, the walls that had once kept him out now thinner, more transparent. "He's happy," she said quietly. "Happier than I've seen him in years. That means something." Ethan nodded, his voice steady. "He deserves that. And so do you." The moment hung there, fragile and honest, until Liam bounded in, holding a soccer ball he'd found among the boxes. "Come on, let's try the backyard." The three of them spilled outside, laughter carrying across the evening air. The yard quickly transformed into a soccer field, with makeshift goals made of cardboard boxes. Liam darted across the grass, his small legs pumping with determination, while Ethan chased after him, pretending to stumble dramatically whenever Liam scored. Claire leaned against the porch railing, watching them with a smile she didn't bother to hide. When the game ended, in triumphant shouts and playful groans, they gathered on the porch steps to catch their breath. The sunset painted the sky in streaks of orange and pink, wrapping the moment in quiet beauty. Liam leaned against his mother, still holding the ball, while Ethan stretched his legs out in front of him. "Feels forgotten," Claire began, then hesitated, searching for the right word. "Different?" Ethan offered. She nodded slowly. "Different, in a good way." Ethan didn't press. He just let the quiet sit between them, warm and unspoken. Later, as night settled, they gathered around the small dining table in the new kitchen. The meal was simple: takeout containers spread across the table, mismatched plates, and plastic cups. But the air buzzed with something that felt more nourishing than any gourmet feast. Plans and chattered about where he wanted to hang his drawings, how he imagined decorating his room, and the backyard plans he couldn't stop dreaming about. Ethan listened intently, chiming in with ideas, while Claire added practical suggestions that somehow didn't dim his enthusiasm but made it real, possible. At one point, Liam looked at both of them, his eyes bright with innocence and hope. "This feels like a family again." The words landed like a soft thunder, both gentle and powerful. Claire froze for a moment, her fork halfway to her lips, while Ethan's hand tightened around his cup. Neither of them spoke right away, afraid of breaking the fragile truth in their son's voice. Finally, Ethan reached across the table, not for her hand, but for a napkin he didn't really need. His voice was quiet, steady. "That's because we are a family, Liam. Always have been. Maybe we lost our way for a while, but we're finding it again." Claire's eyes met his, and for once there was no accusation, no guarded edge, only a glimmer of agreement. Dinner stretched into laughter, small stories, and comfortable silences. When the plates were cleared and Liam was tucked into his new bed, Claire lingered at the doorway of his room, watching him sleep. Ethan stood beside her, his presence quiet but strong. "I feel safe here," she whispered. Ethan nodded, his voice equally soft. "That's all I wanted." She turned to him, studying him with an expression he hadn't seen in years. Not romantic, not forgiving, everything at once, but acknowledging something deeper. Trust, cautious but real. "You've changed," she said, almost as if she was admitting it to herself more than to him. Ethan's chest tightened, not with triumph but with humility. "I had to, for him, for you, for myself." For a moment, they stood in the soft glow of the nightlight, two parents, bound not by the past that broke them, but by the future that waited for their son. As Ethan finally left for the night, stepping onto the porch, Claire lingered at the door. "Good night, Ethan." Her voice held no bitterness, no distance, just warmth. He turned back, giving her a small smile. "Good night, Claire." The door closed gently, but not with finality. The air between them was no longer a wall, but a bridge, fragile yet sturdy enough to hold the weight of hope. And inside, in the quiet of their new home, a family that had once been fractured sat on the edge of something new. Not perfect, not simple, but real and healing, and together.